Welcome to the what and when of using investigations in the workplace. This is the first in a series of 4 podcasts produced by RealWorldHR. This series covers the subject of investigations in the workplace and has been developed using the knowledge and real-life experiences of team members from RealWorldHR, who have worked in many areas of industry within roles such as HR professionals, managers, and officials within the trade unions. In your workplace, investigations will be used in varying ways and for differing purposes, so to understand them we need to answer 2 key questions first of all. When are they used, and what are they used for? But before we look to answer those questions, let's firstly look at and ensure we understand the definition of the word investigation. We no doubt all have our own perception what one is and what it's used for, so let's test those perceptions. If you go on any web search engine and look for a definition of investigation, you'll get very similar answers around the following definition, and that is, investigation is the act of investigating something or someone, a formal or systematic examination or research. That very short and concise definition is then often expanded with the following actions, and hence this gives a much wider context. Words such as examination, inquiry, study, inspection, exploration, consideration, analysis, and appraisals. The definitions may also include the following areas of exploration: research, scrutiny, perusal, sifting, fact-finding, probing, reviewing, and surveying. For the majority of people, their definition would include words relating to inquest, hearing, questioning, interrogation, inquisition, audit, and evaluation. With so many descriptions of what investigations could be, it's very obvious that they are probably used by many of us daily when carrying out our normal job duties, but we do not consciously recognise this. If we now accept this to be the case, then the investigations in themselves, or if you are in a role of manager or employee carrying out one, it should not be the daunting task that it may initially be viewed as. The perception of the word investigation within the workplace can be a negative one, but if we understand the wider definition and how they're an integral part of what we do within the working day, then that perception can alter and, more importantly, can support a different cultural and behavioural approach towards them. So, now we have the definition, let's address our first question, namely, when are investigations used? Clearly they can be used in a number of different scenarios and can have very differing purposes. They can cover everything from individual employee issues such as discipline and grievance, performance and performance reviews, attendance and sickness monitoring, and workplace behaviour and culture, to much larger organisational issues, including, for example, health and safety events and incidents, the review of working practices and procedures, studies with a view to improving delivery or productivity, or an exploration of organisational change and structure. These examples are not meant to be an exhaustive list, and I'm sure you can think of other scenarios where either there is an investigation or an element of the process. So hopefully now we're already thinking of investigations in a much wider context than the usual and often negative perception that they're only used when things have gone wrong, either on an individual, employee or organisational level. Most, if not all, have a direct link to policy within the organisation, and this link and what that means is something we will look at in depth in a future podcast in this series. Our second question to answer is, what are they used for? We have identified the areas of work or the working environment where an investigation may be used, and in reality the purpose of it is to establish the facts of an event, incident or issue. It doesn't matter if it's a complaint or allegation or indeed for a review of a working practice, the basis of the investigation remains the same. Namely, from the outset, they need to be carried out adopting a methodical and structured approach that examines all of the available information, and also, and possibly more importantly, then checks that information for accuracy, consistency, and clarity. How to carry out an investigation and how to collate and test evidence will be covered in a future podcast in this series. The type and amount of evidence that will require examination can and will differ according to the situation, but both physical evidence and witness accounts of the issue will both need to be taken into account. The investigation itself, once completed, needs to give a recommendation and actions arising from it need to be considered. Otherwise, there seems little point in having carried it out. If the investigation is about performance or behaviour that is contrary to the expected or laid down workplace standards, then the outcome could be that issues from individual employees are recognised, recorded, and rectified to stop a reoccurrence. It's important to remember that an investigation can and should lead to improvement for either the individual or organisation, and that they're not just a negative aspect of the workplace. Hopefully, having listened to this podcast, you now view investigations in a much broader context. Investigations or carrying them out should not be something to be fearful of, as with a planned and structured approach they should be relatively straightforward. Please take 5 minutes now to consider your role or job and think, where do you use the skills or methods of investigation in your daily work, and where could you also apply them in the future? Have you identified any skills gaps? Further podcasts will look at the skills and training required to undertake investigations, and we invite you to listen to these. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this short podcast in the series. We hope you found it useful and informative. The next podcast will cover the issue of investigations and the link to policy and procedures. If you require any further information regarding this podcast, or would like any further advice or training, please visit our website www.realworldhr.co.uk, where you will find contact details. This podcast will be accessible as a free resource for future use on the website.